Okay, tell me what it was. Run me through a day. So when you got up at 5 and went to the flight deck, run us through exactly what you did starting your day on the flight deck.
Okay, I used to go up there at 5 o'clock in the morning. Now that was about an hour and a half before they blew flight quarters. In that hour and a half now, what we did was go into flight deck control and check the flight schedules and see what the first flight consisted of. And then we moved the templates around on the Ouija board. And the Ouija board, of course, was a tiny replica of the flight deck. And the templates were the airplanes that went on the Ouija board. And we'd move those templates around and get the planes in position that we wanted to have them for the first flight. And then we would go out and start moving the aircraft around. Well, out there now, when we initially moved those aircraft around, the plane captain was in the cockpit riding the brakes. And the flight deck crew, the blue shirts and the yellow shirts, are the people that moved the airplane around. Some planes were so big they had to be hooked to a tractor to move them. Wow. Others were small enough so that the blue shirts could push them around. Well, when you went out there to spot those airplanes, you put the airplanes in the same position that you had put them on a Ouija board in flight deck control. That meant that you were spotting for the first launch. Now, they usually blew flight quarters about 6 or 6:30 in the morning. And that meant the pilots would appear then, come up on the flight deck, get up in the cockpit and get ready to go. Okay, then now when you look at the launches, we used to go a launch about every hour and a half or 2 hours, from about 7:30 in the morning until midnight.
Wow.
All day, 7 days a week. No holidays. Now, once those pilots were in the planes, then they would start. You send a huffer around, or the starter, and that would allow the pilot to start the aircraft. He'd start the aircraft and run a test check on it. In other words, pull back on the throttle and go to about 80 or 90% and see if the airplane was going to be either up or down. If it was down, then we had to send a crew out there and snake him out of the blooming spot and put him over somewhere where he's out of the way.
Yeah.
The plane was up, then the yellow shirt would have the blue shirts pull the chocks, untie the airplane, and he'd start taxiing the plane forward toward the catapults. Mm-hmm. Now, once it got up there on the catapults, then the cat spotter would put it on the catapult. The catapult crew would hook up the bridle and the nose holder. In other words, the tail holder was a bar that fitted him to a fitting on the airplane and in the deck on the deck. And when the plane fired, of course, then that bar would separate and allow the plane to go on. And of course, the bridle would release at the edge, at the end of the cat run. The bridle would stay there on the shuttle. Mm-hmm. All right, and you launched all the airplanes in that particular mode, throughout whatever. Usually the first launch consists of about 20 or 30 aircraft. So that meant that now to get over the Tonkin Gulf into Vietnam and bomb or strafe or whatever they were assigned to do, and back would take them about an hour and a half or 2 hours. And then, of course, you had to have the second launch spotted and ready to go, and make sure that you had that launch off before those planes returning from the base, from over
mission.
Vietnam, had some place to land on the deck. So once you got the second launch off, then you recovered the first launch, and those planes would go forward. Right, and then whenever all the planes were back and on deck, then you had to pull all those planes back to the back end of the flight deck and get ready for the third launch.
Was the third launch the first launch?
What?
The third launch wasn't actually the first launch, was it?
Yeah.
The guys.
And then the second launch, you were firing it off while the planes were coming back, say from the first launch. That was the second launch.
Yeah.
Then when the second launch was off, then you could recover the first launch coming back.
Yeah.
And then once you got those planes on, you pulled them back and got ready for the third launch.
Wow.
Now, when the third launch got off, that meant that you could recover the second launch.
Wow.
And you used to go through that about every 2 hours now, that turnaround.
Yeah.
Constantly, all day long, and up into the night. Now, a night operation is a little bit different. You didn't send as many airplanes off. Usually a night launch would consist of about 10 or 15 aircraft. And those were the highly sophisticated airplanes that could find their way in the dark and get back out there and all that stuff. But every launch that you sent off now, you also had to send a refueler off, because some of those planes would run short on fuel and they had to be refueled in flight before they could, get into the pattern to recover on the aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
What? Do we have enough?